Kim Jong Un inspects North Korea's first nuclear-powered submarine. That was the headline that broke on December 26th, 2025. And it's not just some regional story. It signals a really dangerous escalation that is, well, it's directly tied to the conflict shaking Europe as we speak. If you support Ukraine and the defense of Europe, understanding these global connections is absolutely vital. You need to see the full picture of how U.S. adversaries are working together. And that's exactly where we're doing this deep dive. I'm Alex, and I'm Araria. Join us for the latest deep dive by Defense Report. We do sharp, no-nonsense breakdowns of the latest in global defense news, military tech, and strategic developments. And today, our mission is to cut right through the noise. We're going to analyze this dangerous convergence of strategic weapons and, frankly, adversarial alliances. We're focusing on North Korea's new naval capabilities and, maybe more importantly, how the lessons from the war in Ukraine are reshaping the entire global defense landscape. And this impacts the Western Pacific and European security at the exact same time.
It's becoming so clear that these conflicts aren't isolated anymore. They're all interdependent. I mean, what Moscow gains from a partnership in Asia, it applies directly to its war in Eastern Europe, and it goes the other way, too.
That is the core of it right there. And the sources we've analyzed reveal three really critical challenges that you need to grasp right now. First, there's a strong belief that deep technological assistance from Russia has pushed North Korea years ahead on this nuclear submarine. It completely changes the game in the Pacific. Second, North Korea is showing off a new class of hypersonic weapons. They're being described as nearly impossible to intercept with the systems we have today, a huge challenge for defense shields everywhere. And finally, we have clear evidence that U.S. adversaries, we're talking specifically about China and North Korea, are openly taking military lessons straight from the war in Ukraine to speed up their own modernization. Okay, let's unpack this, starting with that submarine. The big news is Kim Jong Un's inspection on December 26th. An 8,700-ton nuclear-powered strategic missile submarine. An 8,700-ton vessel. That's a major piece of hardware. This isn't a small step.
No, it's a definitive leap. North Korea is jumping into a whole new era of naval nuclear power. And when we talk about nuclear submarines, we're really talking about strategic stability, or, the lack of it. Diesel subs, even the quiet ones, have to surface or snorkel to recharge. It makes them predictable. A nuclear sub can stay hidden for months. That gives them a credible second strike capability and a truly global reach.
And this is where that Ukraine tilt we mentioned comes right into focus. The speed of this development is what's so alarming.
Precisely. The assessments of how fast this is happening, they all point in one direction. Russian technical assistance. Analysts are pretty sure this aid, whether it's blueprints or components or even just specialized training, has cut North Korea's timeline down by years. This is huge strategic payment for Moscow.
So what does Russia get out of it, specifically for its war in Ukraine?
It's a resource exchange, plain and simple. By giving Pyongyang this incredibly sensitive technology, Russia gets something it desperately needs for its war effort. We know North Korea is ramping up its missile and shell production. That's exactly the kind of high-volume munitions Russia needs to just keep grinding away in Ukraine. So Russia is trading future strategic tech for immediate tactical supplies that help it wage war in Europe right now.
And North Korea wasted no time using this for some pretty aggressive rhetoric. After that inspection, Kim condemned the U.S.-South Korea submarine pact, calling it an offensive act. Then he called for a massive expansion of missile and shell production to boost their preemptive strike capabilities.
They're not being subtle about this.
No, it's a classic security dilemma. They build a new strategic weapon, which forces a reaction from their neighbors, which leads to more escalation. For them, this submarine is a ticket to being taken seriously as a global nuclear threat, not just a regional one. Okay, so this naval threat is clearly being fueled by the war in Ukraine. But what other lessons are being applied? Let's shift from the sea to the sky. Let's talk about drones and hypersonic missiles.
Well, the tactical lessons from Ukraine have been immediate. You can't deny them. Our sources show that both North Korea and China have been very open about how central drones are to their military modernization. We're talking everything from cheap commercial swarming drones to very sophisticated long-range ones. They're watching Ukraine and learning just how vital, pervasive, low-cost spying and strike capabilities are, and they're integrating that into their own doctrine at an incredible speed.
So drones are the low-cost adaptation. But then you have hypersonic glide vehicles, or HGVs, which are the high-end, disruptive threat. We hear the term hypersonic a lot, but why are they being called nearly impossible to intercept? What makes them so different?
Okay, this is where the mechanics get really interesting. A traditional ballistic missile, it launches and follows a predictable arc, way up out of the atmosphere. Its path can be calculated.
Hmm.
That predictability is what allows defense systems like AD or Aegis to figure out where to shoot to intercept it.
Okay, so it's all about predicting the flight path.
Exactly. But HGVs are different. They get a rocket boost, sure, but when the warhead re-enters the atmosphere, maybe around 100 kilometers up, it starts to glide. And during that glide, it's traveling at extreme speeds, Mach 5 or higher, but here's the key, while maintaining the ability to maneuver.
Ah, so it's the maneuverability that beats the defense system.
That's it, precisely.
Yeah.
Current radars need a predictable trajectory to launch an interceptor. If the incoming warhead can suddenly jink left or right, the defense computer's calculation is instantly wrong. The window to intercept just slams shut. It's that unpredictability, plus the fact it glides at a lower altitude, that makes it almost impossible to stop with the systems we've deployed right now. And that's a problem for allies in the Pacific just as much as it is for NATO in Europe.
So, faced with this double threat, a Russian-backed nuclear sub and these new missiles, the Allies have to respond. We saw President Trump announce back in October 2025 that the U.S. would work with South Korea to build their own nuclear submarines.
Yes, and that is a massive undertaking. The plan seems to be leaning on a specific kind of technology transfer, focusing on small modular nuclear reactors, or SMNRs. Instead of trying to copy the huge, complex reactors on American subs, the idea is to develop smaller, standardized, and safer SMNRs. These could be adapted for South Korean submarines, giving them the endurance they need without, all the massive infrastructure and treaty headaches of full-scale nuclear tech transfer.
And this isn't just for South Korea, right? This technology could be used elsewhere.
Absolutely. There's huge potential here for Japan. Japan already has one of the world's best conventional submarine fleets, but their strategic situation has gotten much, much tougher with threats from Russia, China, and North Korea. They need more endurance, more survivability to patrol their islands and protect shipping lanes. SMNRs could be a viable way to dramatically increase how long their subs can stay submerged and hidden.
Okay, let's pivot now to something that happened right here at home. A big domestic consequence of this new security environment. The Trump administration suspended 5 huge offshore wind projects off the East Coast for at least 90 days. That feels like a pretty painful trade-off, halting domestic energy for a foreign threat.
It really shows how seriously they're taking these evolving threats. The reason given for the suspension was new classified information from the Defense Department. It cited the rapid evolution of relevant adversary technologies. Essentially, these giant wind farms, because of their size and location near sensitive military bases on the East Coast, were flagged as having potential for direct impacts to national security.
But stopping 5 major energy projects, is that a proportionate response? Is the threat really that immediate?
It's probably a mix of things, but the security risks are not trivial. Large offshore structures can interfere with low-flying radar, the kind used to track missiles or submarines. But maybe more importantly, the infrastructure itself. All the underwater cables and control systems could potentially be exploited. An adversary could use it as cover to deploy their own intelligence gathering systems very close to U.S. shores. The administration is basically saying coastal defense integrity is more important right now than those specific energy projects.
And all this brings us right back to Europe. Russia's need for Asian technology and money is all tied up with the long war there. So what's the latest from that theater?
On the ground, it's still a grinding war of attrition. The Russian Defense Ministry recently claimed control of Sviatopokrovsky in the Donetsk region. At the same time, you've got Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky trying to open diplomatic doors.
Right, with that peace proposal for a free economic zone.
Yes. Zelensky proposed pulling troops out of the Donbas to create a U.S.-backed free economic zone, which would have to be demilitarized. He suggested something similar for the Zaporizhia nuclear plant area. It was an attempt to create a neutral path for rebuilding, but it required Russia to withdraw from territory it captured. Unsurprisingly, Russia flatly rejected any withdrawal.
And with talks stalled, the West is turning up the economic pressure. We're hearing that G7 countries and the EU are considering a major escalation, replacing the oil price cap with a full maritime services ban.
And that would be significant. The price cap has had, let's say, mixed results. A full ban is much tougher. It would mean banning Western companies from providing all the services needed to move Russian oil insurance, financing, port access. It would make it incredibly difficult and expensive for Russia to get its oil to market, hitting their revenues hard.
But Russia is building its own defenses against this pressure, especially through its alliance with Iran.
Indeed. Russian energy cooperation is a lifeline for Iran. It gives them a market for their own sanctioned energy, helps support their basic services. It's a relationship that shields both of them from Western sanctions.
And this is where they're really challenging the system. Iran and Russia have completely cut the US dollar and the SWIFT system out of their trade. They're just using their own local currencies.
If you connect this to the bigger picture, this is a conscious, strategic move. They're trying to build an alternative economic structure, one that isn't dependent on the West. The power of the dollar and SWIFT is how the West applies financial pressure. By creating a trade route that bypasses both, they insulate their alliance from that pressure. It brings everything full circle: military aid for the war in Europe, paid for by an economic partnership that weakens Western control.
Which brings us to the end of this deep dive. The story today isn't just about one submarine. It's about how Russia's war needs are enabling advanced threats, subs, HGVs, drones that challenge NATO, Europe, and Pacific allies all at once. And these threats are forcing some very costly reactions, from building new navies to suddenly halting critical domestic energy projects.
I think the key challenge for Allied defense is the time lag. It's not just buying new hardware, it's the time it takes between an adversary showing off a new capability, like an unpredictable HGV, and the West being able to adjust its entire defensive posture. And as we saw with those wind farms, getting ready for that future requires some painful choices right now. So what stands out to you about where the next surprise attack will originate?
You've been listening to Defense Report, where we analyze the latest in military strategy, global defense, and advanced weaponry. Subscribe to Defense Reports. It's your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. We'll catch you next time.